Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shred the Veil. I'm Daniel here with my brother Derek, and we are the grandsons of Daniel Morris Salter, one of the 21 disclosure witnesses back in 2001, talking about their military careers at the higher level clearances with UFOs and extraterrestrials. And since that time, it's been my brother and I's mission to shred the veil on what the truth is behind the government narratives regarding um, all those fun topics. So, uh, we're very excited to have Ben Chasteen with us today, another truth seeker. Ben's a producer and host of the show Edge of Wonder, which you've probably heard of, a show that explores every aspect of our mysterious universe. Before it was deleted on YouTube, it amassed hundreds of thousands of subscribers and over 50 million views in just over 2 years. I know that's how I first came across Ben and Rob. Ben, along with his co-host Rob Counts, created their own platform called Rise TV with a massive amount of content along with other content creators. Their goal is to show people that no matter how bad things seem, there is a more positive force that is greater than anything else in the world, and it is through our own awareness, virtue, and inner awakening that we can set ourselves free. I love that. It's awesome.
Thank
Self-empowerment, yeah.
you. Very nice.
All
So
right, Ben. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here today.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great being here. Thanks for having me on, you guys. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Um, and so I guess I would like to start things off getting to know you a little bit better and having our audience get to know who you are. So, can you tell us what really led you into this journey you're on now, this truth-seeking mission that you seem to have, kind of unfolded in your life to make that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the best way I can possibly answer that is as long as I can remember. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
started having crazy experiences really when I was a little kid. And that's how it all started for me. And when I was about 8 years old, I had a really weird experience. It was like a beautiful summer evening. We're out of school. It's middle of summer. And I remember seeing like my family was outside, all my friends were outside, like everyone was playing. It was like the sun was setting. It was like your most ideal, perfect scenario as a kid, like everything's just great. I should have been like super happy playing with my friends and everything else. And I just remember looking at everybody thinking like, I don't know anybody here. Like I just felt so alone, like I didn't belong here. And in my mind, I just kept thinking there should be something else in my mind. Like, why is it just me? And I felt so lonely inside. Like I was like disconnected from something greater. And I wanted to go back to that. And my father, actually, he's now retired, but he was a minister. So, he would always I would always ask him questions about things. Believe it or not, one of the greatest things he's ever said to me was, I was asking him about God and all these different questions about life and all these different things. And the greatest thing he said to me was, I could tell you my answers, but I want you to find your own path. And because of it, it really but I gravitated towards, like in the Bible, for example, I was like really focused on the teachings of Jesus and revelations or revelation, well, Mandela
Mhm.
effect now, whatever. Anyway, so I was like, especially revelation. Like I just knew that we were in this time period. And so anyway, so here I am having this experience where I'm like, I just didn't feel like I belong here and I wanted to go back. And I was like, I don't really know what it is I want to go back to, but like whatever heaven is, I was like, I just want to go back to this place. And in my mind, everything just kind of opened up. And I remember like, it was so like just natural as a kid, when I was experiencing this. And all of a sudden, my mind just kind of opened up and I saw these beings sitting in a circle. And it was like if one of them had a thought, they all had this same thought. And I'm like, yeah, that's where I need to be. That's what's missing. I want to go back to this state, whatever this is, like back to heaven. And I heard this like woman's voice come through. And again, I'm like a little kid, like everything's just like kind of natural. And she's
Mm.
like, Ben, it's not your time to go back yet. There's something that you're going to be doing, and you chose to be here. And after you finish doing what you need to do, you can go back to heaven. And I was just like, oh, okay. And she's like, you just got to be good and, continue on with what you need to do. And then this weird thought came to me was like, I wouldn't need to worry about whoever the Antichrist was. And the other thing was like something was going to happen to me around like when I was 32. And so it was just like, whoa, okay, and then it was just like, okay. And then I just like went over and played with my friends like it was no big deal.
Wow.
So that was
Wow.
really kind of like the first experience that I started having. And as I
Mm.
got older, I just started thinking like, oh man, I was just some crazy kid just probably imagining everything. And I just kind of like stopped believing in that. And I had another like around 8 years old, I was like having all these weird experiences. Another experience I had, I was walking home from school with a friend of mine, and I was just like totally in this very peaceful, like Zen state where I was just nothing on my mind. And I remember like looking at flowers on the ground or something and just walking. And this older kid kind of blocked my path. And I was just thinking, like, what is going on? And this kid just kicked me as hard as he could. And I just like fell to the ground. And he starts laughing and they start running away at everything. And then my friend's like, I'm gonna go grab a teacher. And I'm just laying on the ground, like crying, thinking, like, why did this kid just kick me? What happened? And I just
Right.
heard this voice in my head that was my own voice, but it just said, Ben, stand up. And in the future, he's going to ask you for forgiveness. And I was like, what? And so I
Wow.
just stood up. And I remember this teacher coming over and she's like, come on, let's go back into school. Let us get you look like checked out and everything. And I was like, no, I'm just gonna walk home. And the whole way home, I just was like, I was in a lot of pain, but I just kept thinking, like, what was this voice? Like it was me, but it wasn't me. Like, what happened? And
Wow.
so
Mm.
that became like a really big like I was trying to seek the answers for this.
Mm.
Uh and I just remember telling my mom too during this time, like everything started making sense in my mind. And I remember telling her, like, oh, yeah, we're definitely in the period of revelations. And my mom's like, what do you mean? I'm 8 years old, like telling her this stuff. And I'm like, well, because I'm here. Like I wouldn't choose to be here if we weren't. That's why I'm here to experience this. And it's just in my mind, it was just so matter of factly. It's like, yeah, this is why I'm here because I want to be a part of what's happening, at these
Interest.
times.
Very
So
interesting.
again, as I got older in my like later teen or like early teens, I really stopped believing in a lot of this stuff. And, I was just having a really hard time, really struggling through a lot of emotional things with my friends. We moved from one location in Columbus, Ohio to a different area, and I didn't know anybody, and I was really struggling with the move. And because I
Mhm.
had so many friends where I was, and then all of a sudden, it was like I had to make new friends all over again. I think that really kind of affected me in a lot of ways, especially my friends that I was meeting then were probably a lot more negative or negative influence in my life, I should say. And and like I was just always contemplating these kinds of things, and I was always like thinking about God and the universe and the stars, and I would go outside and see the stars, and like none of my friends were really like that. So,
Right.
so by the time so then like I started changing. I started having some experiences that kind of were opening me up again. And by the time I got graduated high school, I was so happy to get out of school. I was like, I just want to get out of here, start meeting people that are on my level. And it really, I started really changing in that regard. And then I started having like some crazy experiences um, and also like, I think the other turning point in my life was when 9/11 happened. When
Mm.
9/11 happened, that was really when, I just knew that like,
How
I
old were
remember
you then?
I, I'm a lot older than I probably look, but yeah, I was 20. I think I was 20. Let's see, it was 2001. So I was 21 at the time.
Yeah, so was
So
I. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I just remember when that all took place, I knew immediately, this is definitely orchestrated at a way higher level.
Mm,
Whatever like humans are doing, they're just following the actions of something way darker and deeper that's out there. And I kind of took that as almost like a precursor of this is, again, showing like it was showing me like, yeah, this is we're in this final times now, and this is this battle of good and evil like being displayed. And so then at that point, it became this mission of mine of like, okay, what am I supposed to do? I'm having all these crazy experiences all of a sudden, very spiritual experiences, which I can kind of get into because I'm talking a lot right now, but I'm kind of giving a backstory,
yeah.
and I started having these wild see I like it's interesting because I've seen UFOs and I had some encounters with that. I've never really encountered physical alien. But like through meditation, through dreams, and I've seen a lot of UFOs. I've kind of experienced things that way. But my experiences were more in the paranormal world. I was
Mm,
seeing both positive and negative things from like, like very strong demonic things, ghosts, weird encounters, people being possessed around me, things like
wow.
that. And then for me, it was like a major test to see like, okay, can am I fearful of this? Can I remain strong with my faith where I won't be moved when I see these things happening in front of me? And
Right.
it took a lot of courage for me to kind of like build that up. But yeah, I'll get into a really insane story here
I
later
think
on.
I think I know which one you're going to do. Like you have some amazing stories. This is why I wanted you on. I knew you had such an amazing story, just your background and the spiritual side of things. So, just real quick, as we continue, do you think that your dad and the fact that he was like religious or having that, do you think like you are brought into that family for a reason, like, or that like triggered
Yes.
some of that part of you?
Yes. Yeah, I
This,
100% know. I'm in fact, I mean now specifically now, after like meditating for, you know, I really have been meditating for about tw over 20 years now, and I think that's really contributed to why I look so young and I stopped, drinking and doing a lot of things like that and stuff. So, yeah, 100%. And now I even remember, I mean, I think I was a little bit unlocked as a kid. There were certain things that I could kind of remember. But then again, I think all kids are open in this regard,
right,
and then it's kind of up to the parents. A lot of parents get freaked out when their kids start talking about things, or they don't believe it, or they're just straight up scared. So they discourage it. And then, as our notions start forming of like, oh, the world is this way, or I'm being taught this, and oh,
right,
it's not like this anymore, or you can't do this, you can't do that. Then it's like we stop
right.
we get disconnected from that true self that's inside of us, at that moment. And
Like,
I think for me, I've always kind of retained that. And so as I started experiencing more through my meditations, things started really opening up a lot more. And I started seeing, my past lives. I started seeing like, coming into this life, how it was all arranged. I had different choices that were presented to me, in fact. And but I chose like I was like, no, I want, it was like, oh, you could be like super famous, you could be a rock star, you could have this, you could have that, and it was like, no, I'm still gonna go down this path here. So
So with the past lives, was that through a guided life regression, or is that just on your own meditation that you were
it
able
was
to tap
through
into?
my own meditation. It's interesting, with the practice that I do and everything, it's nothing I can control. That's the weird thing about it. It's like I'll start meditating through my own practice of what I do. And specifically it's a practice called I kind of started getting into this practice called Falun Dafa or Falun Gong, which
mhm.
is a meditation practice, basically Qigong meditation that came out in the early 90s. Totally a free practice. Mostly older people were practicing it in China. But it was like people were getting their health better, like healed, in fact. People, I mean, I even know people who do the practice who had terminal illnesses such as cancer. They had one woman had a tumor in her lungs, and a couple other one person I know had a very, very rare illness that he got and when he was in Africa, and he was a scientist, and he went to Africa to study something over there, and he got this extreme rare deathly illness, and the doctors told him there's literally nothing we can do. This is so rare that there's nothing. Like all you could do is like eat healthier, and it might just prolong your life a little bit more, and that's about it. So being a scientist, his mind was like, he didn't believe in anything else. But all of a sudden, he's just like, okay, I guess, I'll just do whatever at this point. I'm just going to have an open mind and I'm just going to do whatever. And he came into this practice. And again, it's a free practice. The books are online and everything else for free. All sites are free. People just go to, come and go as they please. And he starts doing the practice. And within about a year, he noticed that he was feeling a lot better, and he went back to the hospital to get a checkup, and they're like, this is gone. Like, whatever you're
Wow.
doing, keep doing
Wow.
it. Like, we
Yeah.
can't explain it here. There's no explanation for this. And it changed him at the core, where he's like, went from this very scientific mind to like, God doesn't exist, to all of a sudden being like, okay, everything is real.
Yeah.
There's other dimensions that are going on, and there's all these divine beings around us and everything else, and it's like one extreme to the other, and so it's it's amazing to see. And I think when people go through these things, it really changes you fundamentally. And so,
Yeah. That's a very profound practice. I believe our mutual friend Eric in DC is very much into that. I think he is actually an advocate for the rights of people who do that because it's
yeah.
in China it's kind of illegal or something. That it's
Yes, so by 1999, the government, well, I should say regime, Chinese regime, did a internal survey, and they found about 100 million people practicing this. Even like even people within high levels of government were either practicing it or their spouses were. In fact, even like I think even Jiang Zemin, who was the former leader of China at the time, and he was the one that issued the Tiananmen Square he issued the order. He carried out the order for the Tiananmen Square massacre. So he's the one that brought in the tanks and gave the order for the tanks to like shoot down the students, which is why he got promoted to being the leader of China, because he was that evil. So his wife at the time was actually a practitioner too. And so he was enraged with so much jealousy and then he found that 100 million people were practicing this one practice, that he just was like, his jealousy was just so high, because he felt like he was losing power, that he's like, okay, we're going to launch a persecution against this. And to this day, it still continues on. He actually died about 2 years ago, I think. But his son is still running things. In fact, his son is connected to the Wuhan lab.
oh wow.
Oh,
Okay.
geez.
Yes,
That's wild.
there's a huge. If you want to dive in a rabbit hole, you can look up this
Right.
former leader Jiang Zemin and what his sons are doing. And yes, so there was a massive rumor that they purposely did this to make Xi Jinping look bad. So
Uh,
I can't confirm that. And I've tried, all I can find is connections that most of the people related to the Wuhan lab were more tied to Jiang Zemin rather than Xi Jinping, who's the current leader of China. So but
Mm.
yeah, so and then this forced organ harvesting started coming out, because they realized, oh yeah, we have all these healthy people in campsites, what else can we do? And so they started
phew.
yeah, they started selling organs on the black market. And now there has been some legislation passed within the US government acknowledging that this is happening and stopping people from like they actually called it organ tourism. I mean, you could get a new heart within a week. You just go to China, they just take your blood type. Then they match a
Oh,
person who's already in the campsites. They take you to, you go to a hospital. You have no idea what's going on. They'll take the person, take them to that same hospital, do the operation in one room, literally cut the person's heart out. They die on the table, and then they're just taken across the hallway to you. And they
Wow.
just tell you, oh, yeah, it was like an executed prisoner.
right.
And
Meanwhile, these are people that are being held prisoner in these camps for practicing this.
yeah, and it's not just this practice. I mean, it's underground Christians too, because most people, especially most people in the West, don't realize that the Bible is illegal in China. If you have a full version of the Bible in China, you can get arrested. You have to
Wow.
Oh,
have
wow.
the official version of the CCP's version, which most of the teachings of Jesus are taken out. Some of Revelations is taken out, and it's replaced with some like weird stuff that the CCP wants in. And you have to register through the
Crazy.
party what you believe in. Whatever your religion is, it has to be registered through them.
Wow.
That's
So
insane.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there's a massive movement of people smuggling in full Bibles in China. It's insane. And there's like underground churches. Some of them like they would go into these churches and start arresting people. And of course, like the Tibetans have been persecuted ever since like, Tibet came around. So I mean, it's sad. It really is. Xi Jinping has made some improvements and arrested a lot of the officials that were doing a lot of the organ harvesting and doing a lot of in charge of a lot of these operations and stuff. But they were arrested on like corruption, so it's kind of like, okay, why did you just arrest like all these officials, like hundreds of thousands of officials got arrested? I think almost a million, in fact, since Xi Jinping came into office. But again, every single one of them is like, oh, corruption, 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 and it's like, what does that even mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think he's so afraid to say what the crimes are because he doesn't want the party to fall because he depends on the party to keep his power.
Yeah.
And he doesn't
Sure.
realize that if he were to let all that go, people would naturally vote for him as the first democratic leader of China. But I don't have a lot of at this point I don't have a lot of hope in him. But I just feel like time's running out and he's gonna have to make a choice one way or another. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's all going to be like what history remembers him by. And I think if everything starts coming out to the surface of really how bad it was in China, every single person is going to start pointing fingers at him. Like, why didn't you do anything about this? You had full power to do something and you just
Right.
sat on it, or tried to like, you did a little bit, but you covered up the rest of it, So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway,
And
it's
I think that you were saying, how it's interesting the last few years, at least in recently, that we don't talk a lot about China. You don't hear about US, complaining or talking about the corruption. I mean, a lot of people, I don't want to get too political here, but like, yeah, it's like we were kind of almost leaning towards that direction. And I really hope that now that things are starting to come to the surface on a lot of topics, maybe we're changing that, direction we might have been
Yeah.
going down, because that would have been crazy to kind of follow China's path in that direction. So,
yeah. And
yeah.
and I think that the most dangerous aspect of it is kind of more what was China, with like I think that when China's interfering with our political leaders over here, whether it's through bribery, blackmail, or whatever it is, I think this gets very serious. And then on top of that, it's like, a lot of the media was even being controlled by the CCP as well, especially like the New York Times. I mean, they were putting in massive amount of their English version. I can't remember the China Daily or whatever it was, like I mean, so
Mm,
I think this is where, and then again, it's like, why is China buying up all this farmland over here too?
Right.
When
Yeah.
when you match up where they purchase farmlands and you look at military bases in the US, it really does start matching up. Now, there's other areas like Maine, for example. They purchased a lot of areas of Maine where it's like, okay, well, there's not really a base there, but they're growing a massive amount of marijuana there. So it's like,
Right.
what's going on? But
Yeah.
I think that's the dangers of it. You know, China, when you listen, I have a lot of friends who are Chinese, and I used to work for once upon a time, like the Epoch Times. And that's why you know, for the last like 12 years of my life, well, prior to Edge of Wonder, you know, I was really focused on a lot of what was happening in China because really, I feel like that's kind of the center point where a lot of people are missing because it's like, oh, we won't fight this war by invading you with soldiers. We'll just send our business leaders over to the
Exactly.
US and
Yeah.
infiltrate every single company. And that's what they did. So they started
Right.
stealing all kinds of like blueprints, all kinds of like business models, everything. And I'm telling you, business owners, like the CEOs, they know this. And
Yeah.
I've talked to some of them, and they're just afraid to come out publicly because that one, it's like they're afraid of retribution from the CCP, and also they're afraid of like what like public humility. It's like, oh my gosh, if we do this, it's going to destroy our company. I mean, if we come out and say like China
Yeah.
stole every single state's or secret that we had within this company, you know, then it's like people are going to freak out, like their personal data could be compromised, you know, all these different aspects.
That's
And
why that's why I don't like TikTok. I just don't want to touch TikTok. I'm sorry.
I was kind of the same way. I mean, honestly, I mean, you could look at Facebook as not much different from, you
They're
know,
yeah, they're all the same basically. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
But anyway,
but it
But
yeah,
so that
it's
would
such a rabbit to go down for sure.
absolutely. And so we just illustrated the hour of this meditation practice through that whole story. Um, so to
Yeah.
continue on with your experience with it and what you you know saw with that and what where it led you to with your past lives you were talking about.
yeah, well, I mean, eventually, I think like through my own meditations and through this, you know, things started opening up for me, and it's so clear on how it happened, and you know, I mean, I'm ever since really ever since I started meditation, things started happening to me. Like I started getting into massage therapy when I was younger. And so I believe it or not, I'm actually a massage therapist. I just don't do it as much anymore. But weird things started happening to me. Like I would like the very first time uh as a student, you know, you have people come in and they pay like cheaper prices because you're a student, you're learning and everything else. And one of the very first clients I ever had was this woman. And she comes in and you know, I'm just kind of working on her. And it was the first time I ever experienced anything like this, where, you know, usually you start on like a person's shoulder or back or, you know, something easy anyway, especially since like, you know, I'm a student, I'm just doing this for the first time and everything else. And so I think I'm like starting over her shoulders and rubbing her, like, you know, massaging her shoulders. And I felt this like it's almost like somebody pushing my hand, and I'm like, what is going, and this is the first time it ever happened to me, but I felt this like this force kind of pushing my hand right over her stomach, and I'm like,
Hmm.
this is weird. I'm definitely not touching her stomach. You know, it's like that. I mean, I'm like, I'm just starting massage therapy. That's like the last place that you usually go to is someone's stomach because that's just, you know, it's the most sensitive part of your body. It's where you hold everything in. And I'm like, I understand she's probably holding a lot in, but I'm like, I'm not ready to go there yet. So I just go back to her shoulder. And once again, I just feel this push going over her stomach. And I'm like,
Huh.
okay. So I start telling her, like, I kind of feel like I need to, like, just kind of massage your stomach. And she's like, oh, yeah, I've been having so much stress and I'm just going through a lot. And I was like, oh, well, what are you going through? And she's like, well, my husband just passed away. And I was like, whoa, really? Or actually, sorry, he passed away a year ago at that point. She's like, it's been exactly a year. She's like, yeah.
Mhm.
And she's like, that's even why I came in here, is because, you know, I'm just so worried about it. I've been so worried about him, so worried about just everything. And like, I could just see him perfectly. As soon as she mentioned him, it was like he was there. And I
Oh
was
wow.
like,
Wow.
whoa, so he's the one that's like guiding my hand over, you know? And so he started like telling me certain things, and I'm like, dude, and like, this is like the first time I'm giving him like a massage, like an actual client, a massage, and I'm like, I can't just say this stuff, so I'm just kind of like letting her talk, and I'm just kind of, I'm like, seriously, the hour massage, all I did was just like touch her stomach, and that was it for the whole time. So she's just like, I just wish I had confirmation that he was okay. And so
Mm.
finally I'm like, all right, well, he's here with me right now. Like I can see him. And then it was really interesting because like she didn't tell me any of this. And he was telling me certain things about their daughter. And I was like, oh, you have a daughter? And she just starts crying and she's like, yes, this is in Ohio at the time. She's like, my daughter's in Florida and I'm just so worried and blah, blah, blah. And then I was just telling her what he was telling me, like, everything's gonna be okay. Like he's looking after you and your daughter. And she just starts crying, the whole rest of the time. She's just crying and she was just releasing all of this stuff. And meanwhile, I could actually like start seeing in her body like areas of this like energy that was like clumped up. And like, again, I don't even know what I'm experiencing. I'm just like, okay, I just need to put my hands here, I realize, and then like slowly I just see this like in my third eye, I just see this stuff kind of like, dissipate and kind of go away, and this energy is coming out. And I'm like, man, this is insane. So at the end of it, she's just like crying and gives me this huge hug. And she's like, you have no idea. You just completely changed my life. And
Mm.
so at the end, so then at the end of it, I was just like, what the heck is going on with me?
Mm.
I'm like, I've never experienced anything like this before. And I was like, I'm just like, wow. So
Welcome to
again,
your massage therapy career. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, and that's what started happening. In fact, what happened was it was just too strong. It was like as soon as like somebody would get on, like my friend Chris, as soon as somebody would get on the table, it was like I just knew exactly what to do. And my friend Chris was going through a whole lot at the time. And he was a heroin addict for about years up until this point, and he was trying to stop at that time. And I just saw his body to me in like another dimension looked like it was just decayed, rotten body. It was just like all black and like decayed
Mm.
inside his organs were like, just black, like everything was black in his body. And I realized that this thing was like this heroin is like killing him. And so I just start like trying to like clean him out. So I'm seeing what like it's more I'm just being guided doing certain things and all this stuff. And I told him, I'm
Mm.
like, dude, you got to drink a lot of water. Like I don't know, just drink a lot of water. So he felt great later on that day. He's like, dude, he's like, you have no idea. I feel amazing. 2 days later, he calls me and he's in the hospital. And he had like
Mm.
a fever of like 105, and they did every test they can imagine or possible in the hospital. They couldn't figure out anything that was going on with him. He kept thinking, he was like, dude, I feel like I'm gonna die. And I was like, what did I do? Oh my God, I'm gonna like kill my friend. So I'm
Jeez.
like asking everybody I know, and I'm talking to everybody I know. I'm like trying to figure out, like reading books, like what's going on. And finally, I was talking to this older guy that was kind of wise, and he was like, I think he probably just a cleansing. And so finally he got out of the hospital and he's like, dude, I feel amazing now. And I realized that it was just like all this karma and all this stuff. I was like detox. It was like it's kind of like when when you're doing these things, just imagine like you have this tar on your body, right? But it's like it's gonna hurt when you remove it. It's kind of like getting a tattoo removed, right? It's even more
Okay.
painful than getting a tattoo. So it's like the same thing. It's like when you're doing these things, you're cleansing them so much that some people just go through like it's just a very painful process of healing.
Huh.
And it was just almost too much where I had to take a step back and I'm like, whoa, okay, I need to like calm down now. I can't just like start doing this. And plus what started happening was and then through once I started really getting into the practice as well, I started realizing I don't need to put my hands on people. I don't need to talk to like touch them or anything else. I can actually like go into meditation with them and then tune into their energy. And it's like, okay, this is what you need to work on. Because like I could fix this, but until you don't fix it in yourself, it's just going to come
Right.
back again, you know, and you're just going to go through the, it's like taking medicine, and energy work is the same thing. It's just like taking medicine. If you don't fix it at the core, then I'm just wasting my time. And I'm also like pulling in some of your energy too. So it's like,
Oh,
here's what, you know, so it's like now I can just kind of like tap into that and say, okay, this is what you need to work on, you know. But honestly,
Right.
I really contribute this to what I've learned through my own practice of Falun Dafa and everything else. But it's not like I don't do this, you know, I don't even really like talking about it that much. And I don't even think I've ever brought this up on the show, to be because I don't want people to like, you know, I don't want to be known as this. I don't want to be known as that. It's just like, you know, I just want to help people grow spiritually and connect with something deeper within themselves and tell
Right.
people the truth about what's happening. You know, I don't want to be known as like, oh, some healer or this or that. You know, it's like, no, we all have this ability, every single one of this. It's a matter of really like stepping into it and believing that we do. But I think the other aspect is like you have to develop true compassion, because a lot of people want to do this for like fame or money or anything else. You know, I would never charge anything for anything like this. You know, it's mostly like I just do it for like my friends because, or somebody that I'm like, okay, this person really needs this, you know. But
Right.
typically, I feel like we all have the ability to figure things out. And some people just don't want to see that parts of themselves either. You know, they're not ready to go through that change. So,
Wow. It's really
that yeah.
amazing.
yeah,
That
it's
Yeah, and you know, it's like my stories, I just feel like I'm full of all these stories. And when I start, the reason why I don't like telling them all at once is because it almost sounds like I'm making stuff up, you know, just because they're so intense, some of them. But I always tell people, because there's a lot of, you know, especially in this community, there's a lot of people that have said things that turned out not to be true, or they're over exaggerating, or they're saying like, oh, I experienced this, but in reality it was like through meditation that they experienced it, you know, and they didn't come out and say that right away, or all these different things. But I always tell people, you know, like, because this stuff is, I feel like, the most serious form that you could affect somebody, like not just physically but spiritually, and this is a very serious thing. I
yeah.
feel like that if you're lying to people in this regard or trying to benefit out of it for some way or one way or another, this is where like massive amount of karma will just come back to you in some form or another. You know, struck by, like, for me, I'm always telling people, it's like, you know, God can strike me down with lightning right now, you know, if I'm, or like tomorrow, if I'm truly lying about anything that I say, because to me, it's like it comes from my heart. It's the truth. And I'm not afraid of anything of in that regard, because I'm only speaking my truth that I've experienced. And I'll say directly, like, oh no, I experienced this through meditation, you know, take this lightly, you know, or I experienced that. And there has been things where I physically saw things like a being come to me directly. And that was my most life-changing moment in my entire life when that happened.
mm,
That was different from when you were when you were around 8 or so.
Yes.
You
Yeah, and
see that.
actually that's when everything kind of came back full circle. And that was the story I was kind of saying earlier. Sorry, I feel, well, I know you're interviewing me, but I just keep talking. So I don't
oh,
want to give you guys a chance to like respond to anything, but
this is
um
Yeah, this is what we
fascinating. Yeah,
wanted to hear. Like, if
okay, cool.
especially, yeah, thank you. It's like an exclusive for
Yeah,
us to get out.
and I don't really, like I said, you know, I don't really talk so much about these experiences on Edge of Wonder show, you know. We'll talk about it in like a, like we don't have a video, like a produced video of me kind of talking about these things. I actually have my own show, Ben Solo, that's also on Rise TV.
Right.
And I do kind of talk about some of these experiences there. And yeah, but so like with Rob and I, after we got booted off of YouTube, that's when we were like, okay, we need to form our own platform, and that's when we formed Rise TV. And but this experience, yeah, this is the one that really kind of changed my life. And
Was that your in the hospital? Was that a relative when you're? I'd hope it's the right. What when I think it was your grandma that passed, or
oh
was it?
geez, that was a different one.
Okay.
That was after this experience. So those two experiences were the two really big things that changed my life. I guess I talked to my grandmother. I'll talk about my grandmother first. So with that one, yeah, I didn't know like no one in my life really at this point died that I was really close to. And when I was 23, I think my grandmother had a stroke, and so she was in the hospital. She was in the hospital for about 16 hours, and we went to go visit her. And
Mhm.
everyone was just kind of like, didn't really know what to do. We're just kind of waiting, really. And all of a sudden, we're all in the room together. Well, first, my brother and I just kind of like, well, went down and like watched TV or something, just kind of waiting around. And then my uncle started running down the hallway, and he's like, "Hey, your grandmother stopped breathing." So we all went in the room, and she didn't breathe for probably like a minute, and she's just laying there. Everyone's kind of crying, and this like wave kind of went over me, and I was like, "Oh, she's not dead yet." And I just look at my mom, and I'm like, "Oh, she's not dead yet." And my mom's like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "I don't know. She hasn't left yet." And then at that moment, she just took this huge gasp of air. She was just like, and like everyone just jumped back. But I just was like watching her, and I was like, "Oh, that's it. Like she's leaving now." And then, like, she never exhaled. And I swear I just see this light just shining on her body, and I just see her soul, her like spirit or soul just like rising in this light. And like, everyone's crying, and then I start crying because like it's just so beautiful what I was seeing. And she used to call me Benji, and all of a sudden I just hear her voice, and she just says, "Benji." And I was like, "Grandma." I'm like, "I'm not sad." And she's like, "You're not supposed to be. You're going to be helping the rest of the family." And I'm like, "Why am I feeling so much happiness right now?" And she's just said, "I'm letting you feel what I'm experiencing right now."
Oh,
And
wow.
Wow.
I just knew in that moment, like, wow, if we all knew like really what death was like we wouldn't be
Mhm.
afraid of anything, But then also in that moment, I realized like, wow, your life could be over just like that. Like we're so worried about these petty things in life, like the way we
Mhm.
look, or this, like I want this, I want that, or I want to do this, I want to do that, and it's like
Yep.
fighting over the stupid things, or even like money, which is made of paper. It's like all these things, and I was just like, man, really none of this matters. In like a blink of an eye, like your life is over. And that's what really kind of helped me understand a lot. And then she just said, just remember, I'm always going to be with you. And I just see her kind of like in this light. And I saw her as a very younger woman. Like I didn't really associate her with my as my grandmother anymore. It was more of like this angelic being more than my grandmother. And
Mhm.
I just see her kind of like around everybody. And I just remember walking out of there thinking like, a very different person now. And after that, I was never like, death has always, I think I've always been very different. I mean, I've had all my grandparents die. I've had two of my best friends die of cancer. I've have other family member friends that died. I mean, I have coworkers, friends, all kinds of people that have passed away now. In fact, I was kind of thinking, and I even had a friend who was shot and killed too. So
Mhm.
yeah, so it's like it's weird, when I'm really thinking back on all of this, but I'm not worried about any of them. Um, and I know they're all in a good place, and they're all happy. And it's like if we could experience what they're feeling, we wouldn't be so sad. We would actually feel very happy for them. But
Mhm.
I have encountered ones that, like, for example, the ones that I am worried about is when someone dies. very suddenly, like for example, a car accident. Because what I've found for some cases, it like pushes you out of your body so fast. Some people don't know what happened. And it's like that's why I think a lot of people still see ghosts and things like that around certain accidents, or like if there's a house fire or something like that, like people still experience these things because I think in some aspects, they don't, they're in a state of shock where it's like all this time has gone by on our end, but for them, it's like still that instant.
Yeah,
They just die.
yeah, it's like timeless, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like they can't move forward, and you know that there's a lot of like priests and monks in the past, and you know these things were talked about in religion, not so much now as they were, but you know like especially Buddhist monks would do a lot of ceremonies. Like after a battlefield, they would bring in monks and
Hmm.
you know kind of to bless the area, to send the souls back to where they need to be, you know, instead of lingering on the battlefield. So, and there's still priests that do this, you know, kind of quietly, but it's not really talked about as much anymore.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what I thought and note the notions I had really had to go through this fundamental change where I'm like, oh yeah, like for example, I didn't believe in people that were psychic. I thought that was just a gimmick. You know, I was like, there's no way that, you know, people can't become psychic. Like that's impossible. So it
Right.
was, and I didn't believe in past lives. I was like, past lives and like people that are psychic, I just thought these were all stupid and, you know, these things don't exist. And so it was like, oh, you don't believe in this? Here, we're gonna like open you up and like make you experience this firsthand, you know. And then it was like, okay, what's going on with me, you know? And so that it was like this whole journey of trying to understand this. It's like I don't believe in this stuff. Now like it's happening to me. What does this mean?
Yeah.
Especially when I started seeing people in past lives, I'm like, what the heck? You know, I don't even believe in this, but yet, like, you know, I'm seeing certain people in certain events, and you know, and I would ask people about it, like, oh, I saw you in like Ireland and blah blah blah, and they're like, oh yeah, you know, I have a deep connection to Ireland, and you know, that's like growing up, I was always super fascinated by it, and blah blah. It's just, you know, it's so interesting. So
Yeah, for
once
sure.
I started believing in this stuff, I think I kind of like honed in, you know, these abilities. But the thing about these things, I think I think the main thing is like not pursuing this stuff. And I think that's where a danger can happen. Because when you start pursuing these things, you can attract a lot of negative things to you. And I had to go through that to experience kind of the balance between, you know, the good and I guess you could say the dark and the light in that sense.
Right.
And it was kind of a very dark time in my life. And I wanted things really quickly. I wanted to like go deeper with things. And I was really pursuing it hard. And all these warning signs were all around me, and I was just ignoring everything. And and there was even like some being that kind of came through at that time, and I was just like, oh yeah, blah blah blah. And then I got into a hit and run. Somebody hit me and took off. And that was when I was like, I'm doing this all wrong. Like that's why
Hmm.
this, you know, it was to show me like you are going down the wrong path. And if you don't stop, you're gonna like go in a worse situation. So I really took a step back and I was like, okay, you know, and I like destroyed a lot of things that I had, burned a lot of things I had at the time, and even some books that I had. And I was like, okay, you know, I'm just going to clear my mind and just start all over again and just take this one step at a time very slowly. And at that
Yeah.
moment, literally, it was like everything just kind of came through and it was like, okay, you learned your lesson. Now we can kind of come through.
Oh, wow.
And you know, it was like, that's it. That's what they were waiting for me to do. It was like let go of everything for everything
Well,
to kind of like, you know, continue on. And I was just pursuing it too hard. So
so then it was like a blockage. So you got rid of the blockage, and
yeah,
okay. Wow.
exactly. Very
Amazing.
interesting. What?
Very cool. I didn't want to go to the too dark stuff, but were you going to mention? I
Oh
think you
yeah,
taught
yeah. Mhm.
the exorcism sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the big story. that I have. And it's like, and I'm telling these stories, I think, because it shows that, this is why, I kept thinking like, why am I experiencing all these things? Like I'm in like, my late teens, early 20s, and I'm like, what the heck, I'm like, people live their whole lives and still don't even experience this stuff. Like, what makes me different? Why am I doing, like, why am I going through all this? What am I supposed to do with it? And and this experience kind of like helped put some things in perspective for me. So this was like really, I didn't really experience too much up till this point. In fact, I wasn't even in massage therapy yet. So up until this point, it was kind of I I I just knew, I just really firmly believe in God. It was more of like a knowing, not really a believing. I already had some like small experiences to help me, but that was it. And
Yeah.
so I was dating this girl at the time, who was like really into, like, she could communicate with ghosts and things, and at the time I just thought it was weird, I'm still in that kind of phase where I was like not really sure what to believe yet. I wasn't really into psychic stuff and things at that time, so I was like, this is strange stuff. So but I was still kind of curious by it. So one night she called me and she said that she's like, Ben, can you come over? Her friend Kayla, she's like, Kayla is possessed and I have no idea what to do. And I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? Like, I don't know either. So she's like, can you just come over? And I would just rather have you here. And I'm like, all right. And I remember driving over thinking like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. This is a really weird situation. And I'm like, is she even possessed? Like, I don't even know. So I go to her apartment, and as soon as I walk in, her friend Kayla opens the door, and I swear it was like exorcist stuff. Like, she just looks at me, and her eyes were like black, like her pupils were like so big that all you could see was just her pupils, like just blackness.
Mm.
And I mean, you could still see the white in her eye, but I mean, her pupils covered her entire eye. There's no
Wow.
color. And she just looked at me and she's just said, "You're gonna die." And I'm like, what the hell? And she just starts like going over like real, like, all weird movements. And she started going to the wall and starts talking to the wall and saying like all this weird stuff, and just starts almost speaking in a different language at one point. And I'm just like, what the hell did I just walk into? And she's like, my girlfriend at the time, she's like, can you do something? And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And I just totally broke down. I ran in her room and shut the door, and I just started crying on her bed. And I was like, I was so fearful. I've never been that afraid because I never experienced anything, let alone even believed that this stuff could even happen. So I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I don't even know. And I just started praying, and I was like, God, like, I no longer believe you exist. I know you exist, especially with this experience. It's showing me now that, if this can happen, there's got to be a
Sure.
positive aspect to this. So I was just like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I seriously need help right now. I don't even know what to do in this situation. And I was so fearful and worried. And I remember she had a chair in her room, and I just sit in her chair, and it was almost like this little ball of light just kind of pierced through in this dimension, and then it slowly gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it just completely encompasses me. And I'm sitting in a chair. I couldn't even feel the chair anymore. I couldn't even see her room anymore. And all of a
Mm.
sudden it was like this light just like penetrated me, and like all these worries and fears and doubts and everything, my mind just all pushed out of my mind, and what was replaced with this pure compassion and love. Like, it's so hard to describe. It's like if you could have a blanket out of pure love that you just wrap yourself around, and all your worries and doubts, like, just everything just disappears. And it's like the
Mm.
most wonderful feeling I've ever felt.
Amazing.
That Yeah, I just experienced that. And then this woman just comes through in front of me. I could only see kind of like from here up, like her shoulders, but I could see her so perfectly, like more clearly than I was seeing, than I'm like, I can see in this reality. It was so clear. And her hair is just kind of like flowy, And her mouth isn't moving, but I just hear her voice, and she says, "Hello, Ben." And I was just like, "Hi." And I'm like, "Are you an angel?" And she just says, "Well," she told me that like, we would refer to them as angels. They consider themselves more of like beings of light or beings of God. And
Mm.
I was just like, how are you, like, how am I even experiencing this? Like, how are you here? And she just says, "Well, you asked for help and I'm here to help you." And it
Mhm.
was just like, it was just like that. And I'm like, is this,
Wow.
and I was just like, am I dying? Like, I mean, I was like, I realized in that moment, this is what like a near death experience feels like. And I was like, I'm ready to go. I was like, I want to leave all of this. Like, if this is truly like, I'm ready to go. Like, let's leave this world and let me go with you. And she's just like, "Ben, it's not your time yet." She told me there's something important that I was going to be doing in the future, and that she was here to guide me with that. And then she says to me, or I said to her that what, so going back to the story when I got kicked and this whole thing with the beings that I saw when I was 8 years old, and I said, "Was that your voice? Did you come through? And was that your voice that I heard when that kid kicked me?" And she said, "Yes, that was me." And she said, "I've been with you since before you were born." And
Mm.
um and I was just like, we had this like conversation. It was like 3 pages of notes. Kind of looking back now, I kind of feel like I would never ask these kinds of questions. It was just like dumb questions, that you would just like ask. But like now, it would be very, very different. I can't even remember some of the stuff. I just remember like feeling now, thinking like I was embarrassed. But
Mm.
and then I was just like asking her, like, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" And she's like, "Ben, I can't tell you that, but just know that you're on this path and I'm going to be there to help you."
Mm.
And it was and then like, I started thinking, I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I can't leave just yet, even though I want to, because it was so beautiful." But she just said to me, she's like, I'll always be with you, and I'm always with you." And then she just kind of like slowly kind of backed away, and then in the background I just see all these like beings, like silhouette of lights, like these beings that were all like made of light beings or something behind her. And she just said, "We're all with you."
Ah.
And slowly this, like, she kind of went back into this ball and it just kind of faded away. And then it just kind of like, and then for the first time I'm like feeling the chair. I'm seeing her room, and I have no idea how long it went. In my mind it felt like at least 10 minutes. It could have been a matter of seconds, it could have been an instant. Like, I have no idea. I have no idea how much time went by. And
Mhm.
I just remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, I'm a totally different person right now. Like, I am not the same person that I just was. Like, I just had this experience, and
Right.
like everything fundamentally changed about me. And that was the moment when like whoever I was like didn't exist anymore. Like, I was, from that moment on, I was a new person.
Mm.
And I just remember thinking, like, I remember feeling I was floating for the next 3 days. I remember walking into a grocery store and I just felt like I was floating. It was like this such calm, peaceful feeling. And what ended up happening was I was so obsessed with getting that back. Once it kind of faded, that's when I started going down the wrong path, because I wanted this
Mm.
back so strongly. But getting back to the story, so my girlfriend comes in at the time, and she's just like she knew something was going on with me, because she just said, "What just happened to you?" And I just looked at her and I just said, "I'm a totally different person." I knew at that moment the relationship wasn't going to continue on either. But aside from that, it's like in these moments when you're faced with these things, or when you have these experiences, all you can think about is the things that you've done wrong. And a lot of people ask me, "Well, how do you know if there's like, something positive or negative that comes to you?" And I was like, the negative ones will always glorify you, say you don't need to do this, you don't need to do that, like you're so special, you're this person, you're that, and everything else. Whereas like when you're truly faced with a divine being, like all you want to do is cry and think about all the things that you're doing wrong and all the things you want to change within yourself. And I
Right.
realized at that moment, I was like, no drug on earth could ever experience could compare to this moment. And I just thought like I can't even do drugs because otherwise no one's gonna believe me. They're gonna be like, well, you're on drugs, and so that's why you had this experience. And so I was like, wow, I just have to, and I just from that moment on, I was like, I can't do anything. I just knew. And
Yeah.
so anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm hearing this voice in my head that was like, she had this bookshelf, had all this stuff on it, just like random bunch of weird, just all kinds of stuff. And at the very bottom of her bookshelf, couldn't even see it. I just reached down and I don't even know what I'm like thinking in my mind, what am I doing? What am I reaching behind for? And I like grab this, like I just feel the statue thing and I pull it out. I don't even know what I'm pulling out. And I pull it out and it's literally a statue of Jesus.
Hmm.
And she was like, I don't even, she's like, well, how did you know that was there? I didn't even know that was there. And I'm like, I just look at it and I'm like, it's time. Bring in your friend. And then her friend just burst in the room, started like saying all this crazy stuff and everything else. And the best thing I can say is like I'm watching myself do this. It's not really, I can't really give myself credit here. It's like I'm just seeing myself. It was like something was working through me, and I just, I'm like, oh, I just need to put my hand on her, and I hold up this like statue of Jesus, and I was like, this needs to come out of you, and she starts getting really defensive and angry, and I say it again. Finally, I say it for the third time, really sternly. I was like, this needs to come out of you right now. And then literally she just like shakes her head and I see her eyes, they're all black and then they just start turning blue. And she has these like deep blue eyes. And she was just like, oh, hey guys, what time is it? And we're like, I don't know, like whatever time it is, 8:30 or something. And she's like, oh wow, I need to get going. It was really great seeing you. And then she leaves. No memory of what just happened. None at all. To this day.
Jeez.
She doesn't know.
Wow.
I
Oh
mean, they
man.
don't really talk to each other anymore, but and I end up connecting with her actually, my ex-girlfriend, like a couple years ago when I was kind of retelling the story to seeing what she remembered, and she's like, "Wow, I haven't thought about that day in forever." And she's like, "Yeah, that's right. Kayla didn't remember anything," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
she didn't." But that was the moment where I was like, "Okay." I guess God has a mission for me. So then I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? And that was this whole path. It was like, okay, and like so many people would come up to me, so many random people I knew, they would be like, oh, God has a plan for you. I'm like, thank you. Can you tell me what that plan is? So it's like
Right.
everyone's telling me this, but no one tells me what the plan actually is. So I was kind of getting a little bit annoyed, like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? But I started having these visions of myself on TV. So I was
Hmm.
like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but maybe it's something related to being on TV or whatever. And then like, I moved to New York. Um, and that's how I met Rob, my co-host for Edge of Wonder. We were both
Hmm.
working at Epic Times at the time, and I was experiencing a lot of crazy things. I was telling everybody all these stories I was going through, and and then I started just doing some like random Facebook Live stuff because I was a the main photographer, so I'd go out and then I started just doing like Facebook Lives on the Facebook page of just telling people what's going on. And one time something went viral that I did, while I was live. It was like 20,000 people watching simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that's when everyone's like, dude, you got to do a show or something. And I had this whole idea of like a weird news kind of show. And then it slowly kind of morphed into what is like Edge of Wonder. And I started it by myself. Well, Rob was doing all the back end stuff. He was really busy. So he was doing a lot of the design work for it and whatnot. And then
Hmm.
that's when I was like, hey, why don't you come on with me? Because I think it's better having a co-host that we can kind of like, have slightly two different personalities and talk about these things. And because I
Yep.
mean, and then like we were like, I was watching a lot of other videos and I was like, okay, everyone takes themselves way too seriously. I mean, there's like when if you're talking about like, shape-shifting reptilians, there's only so far you can go until you have to like, start laughing at it eventually, or
Yeah.
it's like
Right.
not saying that it's not true or true, it's just this fact that's like you can't take this stuff too seriously. You have to have fun with it at the same time, even though it probably is the case, but you
And you draw in a lot more people that way. I mean, that's
you
why I
do.
think it's such a good
Exactly.
following,
Yeah,
you
no,
know.
that's exactly it. And actually we did an episode on kind of like the history of these like lizard people being, and it goes all the way back to the Hopi Indians. And that's the insane thing. And
Yeah.
we did a whole story or a whole video, a whole episode, not just like, the shape-shifting reptilians, but realistically more like the things that these lizard people that people were seeing that date back all the way back like a couple hundred years. And there's a lot of news reports in the early 1900s of people
Right.
seeing lizard people around the area, and they're real news reports. And then like
Hmm.
the LA Times
Yeah,
had
that's right. Yeah, like,
1930s about the catacombs under LA that were all created by the lizard people and stuff, So and every culture has these lizard people. They talk about these lizard people in every single culture. They have names for them and everything. So it's like Bigfoot. Why every
yeah.
single culture on the planet, and our planet right now, has a word for Bigfoot. And it's like, if this doesn't exist, why does every culture have a word for it? You would think, and you may find it in like one or two, but literally in every single culture I was looking into, every single language has a
Yeah.
term for what is Bigfoot. So it's really fascinating.
Wow. Is there any
That makes
significance to the northern New Mexico area with respect to the lizard people historically that you know of?
Well, so this, according to the Hopi Indians, there was and this was written about, is that there were these lizard people, but they didn't call them lizard people. They call them like, I forget, there was a specific name that they had for them, like, oh, man, reptilian brothers or something like that. I can't remember the exact full name, but I guess like they there's I guess they built, supposedly according to them, some of the locations on Earth, like some of these like serpent mound things. It's like they say, well, it's a Native American burial Indian mound, but then again, it's like it lines up with the winter solstice 10,000 years ago perfectly. So this
yeah, yeah.
clearly is not 1,000 years old. That this looks like it's like 10,000 years. And Graham Hancock really exposed that, and each
Yep.
curve of Serpent Mound lines up with a star and the point of the
Right?
moon during the winter and summer solstice.
Mm.
So it's like, but it lines up perfectly 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So so what they said was that they were living above ground. I don't know what the time frame is, but at some point in history, there was a massive wildfire that was like 400 miles across that was spreading all through the United States at the time, what is the United States now. And according to the Hopi legend, that these lizard people went underground and they had a super advanced technology, and they were able to build these like tunnel systems, which a lot of people suspect that's why we have these caves, like Mammoth Cave.
Mm.
I mean, it's insane when you really the cave system is a massive rabbit hole, and so many people go missing in these caves, and not just like, oh, they got lost. No, it's like they were never found again. No body was ever recovered. No idea what happened to them. Some
Mm.
people are missing around where the caves are. So there's a lot of weird things about these. And so the story is that they built these underground caverns to escape from the fires. And then as like the human population grew, they just stayed underground.
Mm.
Mm.
So that's the story, and the whole, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, the shape-shifting aspect of things, I have no idea if it's like technology, if it's some mind control aspect of things. But I do know people that have encountered them now. And I 100% believe in what they're saying, and how it affected them. Because
Right.
like, I have a friend, as she was telling me the story about what happened to her, like she's just like violently shaking, like she couldn't even like get it out, what was going on. So, and so many people have these experiences, and I personally haven't really encountered, you know anything like this, but I have seen like some people have seen their eyes, like people's eyes change, and I have talked to people that have seen that in people, or like
Mhm.
somebody will turn and it's almost like a wave, like their face kind of like morphs and change, you know? So
Mhm.
I have I have a friend that happened to they saw somebody like that too. And
Mm.
I
but
think there's something to it. It's happening more and more because I think also like the veil is being lifted. I think like those types of entities, if you want to call them that, or versions of like a human hybrid or whatever, that have make maybe that amount of blood of the reptilian blood or whatever. And that's why the royal bloodlines and the presidents and there's all the conspiracy around that stuff. So maybe
I
there's
know.
something to it. And maybe they want to keep the bloodline for that reason because they're closer to that reptilian side and that darker side. And maybe because you think about the dimensions or the densities and like the fourth, you're seeing like shifts into the fourth now or into higher than what we're used to. So we're just getting adjusted maybe to those realms that are closer than we think.
uh,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
it's insane. It really is. I mean, and it's like it just sounds crazy, you know, like oh,
yeah,
shape-shifting, giant shape-shifting reptilians, you know, like what the heck? But
yeah,
but you know, it's weird. It's weird because you can find these mentioned in a lot of cultures, and you know that it's like I mean, especially a couple hundred. I mean, if you go back a whole, you know, 1,000 years ago, if you saw one of these things, you would just instantly think it's a demon, you know. So
Yeah.
it's like who knows what people were seeing or what was happening. But yeah, I mean, you know, that's like I mean that's the conspiracy of all conspiracies, you know, giant lizard people controlling the earth. But you know, it's still the
yeah,
one thing that the Simpsons it's the one thing that the Simpsons haven't predicted yet. You know, it has the alien or the humans up on as the president, you know, one of the episodes, and then their face gets removed and it's this like reptilian
Right.
looking alien,
right,
you know.
right.
So it's like
We're
everyone
still waiting for that big
waiting for
drop.
that to happen, you know.
Right.
It's like one of
Yeah.
these days, and there, I don't know. There's this whole rumor that you know they like our planet warmer, which is why like things are heating up. But I don't know about any of that. But maybe not. Who knows? But
Yeah.
but I just find this stuff really fascinating because you know
Right.
it's like yeah, you know once like I said, once you start diving into other cultures, and it's like wow, so many cultures believe in this stuff. It's just like a fact to them. Like these things are real. So why are we denying it just because it's so weird and out there and it just doesn't make sense or what, you know? So but then again, there's all these movies that depict them, like same thing with like shape, especially like Marvel comic book stuff and everything else. So
Right.
it's really weird when you but you know, there's so much that we just can't explain in our world. So and
Yeah.
let alone
And
like all those like dimensions and realities and everything else that are going on. So
yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many topics too that you cover on your show, and I don't know, you must do so much research to come up with all these things. It's
Well,
amazing how far you guys go.
yeah, we
looking
were
at
thinking
Rise
about
TV, the amount of different content and all the topics you guys cover and how in depth you
Yeah,
have these documentaries and series, it's mind blowing. You
yeah,
guys really do it well.
thank you. Yeah, it's I mean we've produced over just like not even our live shows, just like physically produced, I think like about 1,000 videos almost.
Wow.
Um so
wow.
many, you know, and like yeah, every topic you can possibly I always tell people I'm like, yeah, I feel like I have a PhD in conspiracy realism. I don't
Yeah.
like to say
I would say
conspiracy
so.
theorist, but it's like conspiracy realist or
Realism.
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know, whatever it is. But yeah, because like I'm like, well, I can like kind of almost, you know, it's like what to talk about. Well, I can pretty much talk about almost anything because
Yeah. I was
you
I
know.
was scrolling through and I was like, wow, I want to see that one. I want to see that one. I want to see that one. It's like, yeah, so much.
Yeah, it's
Um,
and
pretty
you
exciting.
mentioned because I know it's getting late, but you mentioned you're starting to look more into the AI topic and like microchipping and stuff. That's one that, yeah, we're
Yes.
definitely interested to know the path we're leading towards in that area. But what have you kind of uncovered with that?
Well,
That you,
what I'm kind of like now seeing that a lot of people are chipped without realizing that they are. And there's some people that I've connected with that have the ability to to test to see if people have been chipped. And so I think that this is going to be the future of the conversation. Like right now, I feel like the conversation of like, oh, are aliens do aliens exist? Are UFOs real? I just feel like it's like, yeah, we're already moved past that point. Most of us,
Yeah.
even in the mainstream world, are kind of moved past the point of like, well, yeah, it's like there's something in our skies. The Pentagon even said recently that, there's these or UAPs that have been flying around military bases that even they don't know what they are. Are they aliens? Are they from other countries? I mean, that's the whole question, but I think we're going to move away from this topic of like, are aliens real to more what technology is being hidden from us? And then the question is it alien or is it like Black Ops military program or is it a combination of both?
Right.
And I think what's going to start happening is that a lot more people are going to be aware that they have some kind of chip in their body without them knowing it. So it's going to put a lot more pressure on the government, on the media to address
Yeah.
these issues. And it's no longer going to be a question of like, well, are aliens real or not? It's more of like, what is happening? What is this advanced tech that we are seeing? We want
Right.
answers. Is it China? Should we be worried that China has some advanced technology, or is it some kind of extraterrestrial threat? And if so, the public needs to know about this now. And
Yeah.
I think that, with the changes that are happening in the current administration and everything with, or like the future coming in with the Trump administration, I am a little bit optimistic because they really want to release a lot of these documents. Robert Kennedy wants to be very transparent with all this stuff. I mean, from day one, said they're going to release the JFK files. They're
Right.
already talking about all the other stuff that's going on. So I think for in a world of disclosure, I am very optimistic and I'm really curious to see what's going to come out through this. And I think that it's going to shock a lot of people, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of people will be like, yeah, okay, we already know this now. Now let's get into the technology. How is this technology being utilized? Is it being used against the people? And I think that's the most dangerous aspect of it because then it's like, well, like you can get into the question of like the 5G, like what's really in our phones. Perfect example, in 2016, Bloomberg reported that it was Apple was trying to keep this a secret, and somebody at Apple leaked it to Bloomberg that Apple identified a tiny microchip within the iPhone that wasn't in the original design. So, in other words, China was adding some kind of tiny microchip in the iPhone, and
Wow.
Apple didn't want that knowledge out because what was it doing? I mean, and then you think about how many products are made in China, like our computer, like who knows what's in these devices, and that's where I feel like the conversation is going to start heading towards in the future. It's like what tech, how small, like what is this, like this nanotechnology? It's very scary, in the AI world. It's like everyone's worried about AI, but it's like, what about the nanotechnology? That's where everything gets crazy. And
Mhm.
also quantum computers, all these things, combine all this stuff into one, and it's like you have a weapon more powerful than like a nuclear explosion, or a nuclear bomb. Like at this point, like you can dominate the world with this kind of nanotechnology, and no one would ever know because it's so tiny, and you can infiltrate anything that's on the internet or any device that's connected to the internet. And if we have
Right.
chips in our body, then it's like, what does that mean? Can 5G interact with these? Why are they in our bodies? What are they doing? So I think this is where the future of the ufology world is going to gravitate to in the near future. And I think a lot more people are going to be talking about this.
Yeah. Good point. Probably within the next 4 years, I would
Yeah,
say.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely
Yeah.
agree. Next 4, next couple years, yeah, I think that And like right now, like Netflix already has like a bunch of new shows about alien abductions, and I think George Knapp has a new show and whatnot, and and these are all big shows there now on Netflix. So people are very fascinated by this stuff, and I
Yeah.
don't think
Mhm.
this topic's going to go away. And so yeah, so I definitely sense this is where things are going to start gravitating to.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff is about to happen. So it's an exciting
Mhm.
time. Um, I think we're getting pretty close on time, but I did wanted to kind of go back to one thing you said, just out of curiosity, when you were 8 years old and you had someone tell you something was going to happen at 32 years
Oh,
old.
32, yeah.
Was there anything significant that happened? Was it any of
Well,
those incidents that you mentioned, or?
I was 32 in 2012.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and so then when I was like 2013, I was 33. And and everyone was predicting like something big was going to happen, but I think that's truly when we entered a new shift, and almost like I feel like when CERN activated, that's when like people started noticing these Mandela effects and everything else. And
Okay. Yeah.
I almost feel like where we remember, like for example, like Ed McMahon, everyone remembers him being Publishing Clearinghouse, and yet he never works for Publishing Clearinghouse, even though everyone remembers. It's
I didn't even
all
know that one, but yeah, he totally did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
definitely.
I mean that's the only reason why I even knew who Ed McMahon was. Like if
Yeah,
I
exactly.
didn't know, I was too young to like know who he was outside of that, and I would
Right.
get Ed McMahon and oh, the other Ed guy who's the football guy. Ed, oh gosh, it just slipped my mind now. Um, Ed McMahon.
Oh, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
He has all the sports
Oh,
games.
Ed Mc, the guy that did the NFL Madden,
Yeah,
Madden,
yeah, 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 yeah. I would get the two of them confused all
John
the
Madden, yeah.
time.
Yeah.
John Madden.
John Madden, yeah, John
Yeah.
Madden and Ed McMahon. I would get the two of them
Yeah.
confused all the time because I associated both of them with football. Because when I
Mm.
was younger, I just remember Ed McMahon would show up with the big checks, in the
Right.
middle of the halftime show. They would have a commercial, and
Yeah.
every halftime commercial show, he would show up, and I would get John Madden and Ed McMahon always confused. So I was like, now it doesn't make any sense to me that I would get these two confused and relate them to football when
Yeah.
Right.
Ed McMahon, or yeah, never even was a part of Publishing Clearinghouse now. It's just like mind blowing. Like people don't even
That is,
understand it. They're like, no, no, he was for sure. I'm like,
yeah.
he's not in this reality. He wasn't. Everyone remembers it. Like
Yeah.
seriously, I mean, there's all kinds of references to like him having big checks and Publishing Clearinghouse and
Right.
all
Yes.
over in pop culture.
All over
But
TV. Yeah. Yeah.
and everyone's like, well, okay, so then Publishing Clearinghouse had to come out with an official statement saying that he never worked for them. He did work for something called, I can't even remember the name of it, Americans. It's like Publishing Clearinghouse, but something called American something something. And
Yep.
he worked for them, but he was never a spokesperson for them.
Right.
He only worked in their office, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And no one even knows what this company is. It was only Publishing Clearing anyway. It's super weird. So
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that whatever CERN, these experiments that CERN is doing, I think really changed a lot. And I think that in some aspects, maybe the world did end in 2012. Maybe it
Well,
did.
yeah.
And we
The
were
one
just
that we
brought
knew.
over to like a different reality, a different timeline where it's like, okay, well, it's not time for this phase to end yet, and maybe one
Right.
world did end. And then like, we just kind of like all woke up and was like, oh, wait a minute, things are different, but it's the same, and so I'm thinking that, so I almost think that something big did happen, and we entered a new reality. We entered whether it's a new reality or a new era in history, and that's what
Right.
the Mayans said. The Mayans never said that it was going to be the end of the world. It was going to be the start of a new world, or a new awakening, where people
Yeah.
are really going to start waking up into like their full potential. And I think that's exactly what started happening.
Yeah.
So I do
Good.
think that, you know, we may have some like dark times ahead of us. Um, and it's nothing like anyone it's not gonna be from any one person doing anything. It's just, I feel maybe the dark side of things. Yeah, they may try to, like, for example, like destroy our economy one way or something like that, and I don't know. I hope now, like, I don't know. I feel like a major shift has also happened, in a really positive way.
Yeah.
So like I felt like all this weight on my chest, and I just kind of feel it all lifted. So I feel like we're just kind of in unwritten territory. A lot of people couldn't a lot of psychics had a hard time predicting what was going to take place, especially like right now in this era. And I think it's just because things have been constantly trying to, both sides, and I don't mean like, like light and the dark side, I mean, have been trying to like control this, like the fate of humanity, this timeline. And I feel like that's what's been going on behind the scenes for a long time. And I feel like it kind of converged at this point where a shift has happened in a positive way. So we'll see what happens, but I think that that's why a lot of people are going to have a hard time predicting anything, because um it's almost like we shouldn't even be here where we are.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
I feel like everything should have ended already, and like
Yeah.
everything should have been like, carried over. It's just like it's allowed to continue on, and there's just like it's like history should have already stopped at this point, and we should have like switched over into the new world or whatever it is already, and we haven't yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of in some aspects what's going on, but
We're in overtime or extra innings
yeah,
right now.
that's a good way of putting it. We're in
Yeah.
overtime and no one knows what's going to happen. So, but I think like no matter what happens, I'm very optimistic. Even if we have to go through some kind of dark period, I think at the end of that, the light will break through and everyone will see the truth as it is. And that's
Well, for sure. And I think the message that you had, all the stuff you shared, like your personal information, I'm so glad you were able to share that with us. And thanks for taking the time, because that maybe also is stuff that people need to hear right now and know that they do have the light working with them, and when all of us, and how important our consciousness is and our mindset, all of that is tied to our reality, because our thoughts can help create that future. So um, I don't know. I see all that being tied together. I think me and my brother are kind of drawn to those kind of topics more and more now too, and letting people know how powerful they are individually. And I think, yeah, with your message, you're definitely spreading that the word out. And I think there's plenty of work for you to still do. I can see that for sure. Yeah, yeah.
I hope so.
Such a cool story, and such a yeah. It's amazing. There's so much power in what you had to share with us. So thank you. Yeah.
No problem. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you having me on. This was a really great conversation. So sorry, I kind of like took over most of the conversation, but
No, this was perfect. This was exactly what I was hoping for. So this is great. Thank you for sharing and
nice.
taking us on your truth-seeking journey.
Yeah, no
So,
problem, you guys.
And
Thanks.
it'll probably be aired more closer to Christmas time. So it's probably a good message for people to hear around that time too. So
Great.
yeah,
That sounds
yeah,
wonderful. So
yeah, yeah.
and we'll have links to Rise TV in the description and everything, every place people can find you. So,
great.
Thanks
all
so
right. Well,
much.
thank you, Ben. We appreciate your time, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
All right. Sounds good, you guys. Thank you.